Sit relaxed as we talk about how to find genuine happiness in the present moment. Happiness is in the aggregate called feeling or sensation. We look for happiness outside of ourselves, seeing a movie, listening to music, eating and drinking, being with friends, or any other sense pleasure from external sources. When we suffer, we want to relieve it by finding happiness in material possessions, such as a nice house, a car, a good job, praise, fame or honor, or in experiences. But, in fact, happiness is already there inside of us, we just don't know how to access it. We don't know how to find happiness within, so we always depend on external sources, other people and material possessions. We're always looking for something or someone to fill in the missing pieces without knowing that both happiness and suffering are within us as the 5 aggregates. Happiness and suffering arise within us, but we think that external objects are the cause. When we were little, we thought our happiness came from toys and play. As we grew older, we were taught to rely on external sources of happiness, to study, to achieve higher education, to work hard, to find a good job with good pay so that we could afford all the material possessions, find good friends, a good partner, and have a lovely family and children. We hoped that once we acquired all of these things, we would find happiness. We constantly try to satisfy our endless desire and craving for more and better things to make ourselves happy and to compete with others. But we spend more time looking for external sources of happiness than seeking happiness within ourselves. In the end, none of us can escape growing old, getting sick, being alone, and finally dying. We can't always find someone we can rely on, since not even our children or family members can take care of us when we're old. Everyone is just too busy. Some elderly people engage in various activities to keep busy and kill time, but in the end they will still get sick, lie down in bed and die. During their lives, they never spend any time cultivating mindfulness and wisdom in order to find real peace and genuine happiness. Even towards the very end of their lives, many are worried and anxious about their loved ones, their children and grandchildren, and what they will leave behind. When they are about to die, their hearts are full of suffering and attachment to their loved ones, and the mind is clouded by sadness or anger, and they're unable to rest in peace. They never heard the Dhamma and prepare the mind to be mindful towards suffering and problems, and for the time of death, we're obsessed with sensual pleasure and think that somehow we will achieve permanent happiness, but the truth is that everything we acquire is under the rule of the 3 marks of existence: impermanent, suffering, and no self. A healthy and strong body gets sick, feelings of joy and happiness turn into suffering, and good memories turn into bad memories. Wholesome thoughts turn into unwholesome thoughts. The mind that is bright and happy can become obscured and dark, or lazy and sleepy. The 5 aggregates are impermanent and unstable. Ultimately, no one can keep them from changing or can overcome aging, sickness, and death. We're always running after external sources for our happiness, including people, experiences, and material possessions, hoping that they will be dependable and reliable. We think the world is dependable because we have never heard the Dhamma, and never knew that there are 31 realms of existence apart from this human realm. We haven't heard of the cycle of death and rebirth. We're lost and trapped in sensual pleasure acquired from images, sounds, smells, touch, material possessions, fame and praise. We haven't learned that suffering is inherent in the world and in life. Everyone has to experience sadness, unsatisfactoriness, separation from loved ones, and the pain and stress arising from frustration, aging, sickness, and death. Suffering is the truth of the body and mind. The 5 aggregates are the mind and body, the physical and mental components of experience, which act as the basis of attachment and thus create an illusory sense of self, namely, 1. Form, 2. Feeling, 3. Perception, 4. Mental formation, and 5. Consciousness. Everyone, rich or poor, the king and ordinary people, and even Lord Buddha, All of us have these 5 aggregates, which are the origin of suffering: birth, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, encountering those we don't like and separating from those we love, not getting what we want and getting what we don't want, and finally old age, sickness and death. No one can escape from this truth or the law of nature. We need to detach ourselves from the 5 aggregates. Then we will see their true nature, arising, existing and passing away, and the impermanent nature of conditioned reality, including the cycle of death and rebirth. Lord Buddha said that within the cycle of death and rebirth, the sea of tears from suffering rises higher than the 4 oceans. While we cannot go back to change the past, we can always focus on now and what we do at present in this life. If we practice Vipassana, we can walk the path of wisdom, starting with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and end the cycle of death and rebirth. Without the 4 foundations of mindfulness, there is no way that we can achieve right concentration that will allow the mind to observe and know the truth of the body and mind, to see clearly the 3 marks of existence: 1. Suffering, 2. Impermanence, and 3. No self. Without mindfulness and wisdom, we won't clearly understand the true nature of the body and mind, and craving and clinging will become attached to the 5 aggregates. This will cause us to continue to wander in the 31 realms of existence. If we don't prepare ourselves for death, when the time comes, we may regret that we didn't have the opportunity to learn, to see and cultivate our minds to be free from the pain and suffering, or we did have the opportunity but we didn't take advantage of it. Before death, we will recall our good and bad actions, emotions, wholesome or unwholesome behavior, greed, anger, hatred and delusion, and we will see the image of where we will be reborn. People who have not trained in mindfulness, concentration and wisdom will become lost in these recollections and visions during this transition. Our thoughts are like vehicles that take us through death and rebirth into the different realms. The last mind moment of this life will be the cause for rebirth in wholesome or unwholesome, pleasurable or unpleasurable realms. The mind that has not trained in mindfulness, concentration and wisdom will become lost and attached to the thought of the last mind moment, good or bad, or a sequence of action which we performed in the past and the causes of which we created. Every time there is contact, cause and effect, the defilements within the mind arise, including greed, anger, hatred, and delusion. Attachment to these defilements is the cause for rebirth in a new body, the cycle of death and rebirth continuing. If the new body is an animal, such as a chicken, the mind will be attached to the 5 aggregates of the chicken and believe that it is a chicken, a self. We will do everything that a chicken does until we again encounter old age, sickness and death and transition to another body. Because of ignorance of the way things are, attachment or clinging keeps the cycle of rebirth and suffering going. We're not mindful and don't recognize the contact that causes the 3 mental states, feeling, perception and mental formation, to arise, but instead we attach to the contact and cling to the feelings, perceptions and mental formations, thoughts, that arise. Craving and clinging cause us to perform action and we suffer as a result. There is a genuine happiness that arises with the liberation of the mind, when we let go of craving and clinging. The goal of Buddhist practice is the final liberation of the mind from all suffering. Practicing mindfulness is the starting point of liberation, and we maintain mindfulness by cultivating an increased sense of awareness and alertness by knowing or noticing when delusion arises in the mind. When mindfulness is fully cultivated, morality, right concentration and wisdom will follow. Mindfulness is like having someone on your shoulder who reminds you that what you're going to say is good or bad, the implication of your words, and whether or not you're repeating yourself. When you don't know what to do, mindfulness does. Each moment of mindfulness practice liberates the mind from defilement, desire and attachment, one step at a time, and brings us happiness. We will be content with less and have right view and right effort to the threefold training, Trisikkha, To cultivate 1. Morality, 2. Concentration, and 3. Wisdom. When we learn to let go and eliminate defilements, the gradual process of liberating the mind begins. True happiness will arise and the mind will be awake, aware, calm, peaceful, and fresh. This practice is the opposite of searching for external sources of happiness to satisfy endless desires, which depends on external conditions and possessions and is driven by the illusion of self, all of which becomes meaningless when we die. It's not easy to find the path of Buddhism or the Dhamma teaching that points the way out of suffering, the path to enlightenment, like a light that shines through the darkness to show the truth of the way things are, the path leading to the realization of that truth. The teaching of the Buddha is based on natural laws and summarized in the Four Noble Truths, and only shows us how to live in the present moment with this body and mind and how to cultivate virtue, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, the tools that guide us through the problems of suffering in our daily life. The teaching shows us how to eliminate the cause of suffering, which is craving and clinging that controls our mind, causing us to break the precepts. When we break the precepts, we experience regret over our actions, depression, and anxiety. Vipassana meditation is the way to cultivate peace and wisdom and liberate the mind and body to be free from suffering. It is the greatest blessing for a human life, better than making donations or doing good deeds. The 10 fetters bind the mind to the cycle of death and rebirth, and the realization of the 4 stages of enlightenment occurs with the progressive abandonment of the fetters, which are 1. Self-illusion, 2. Skepticism or uncertainty, 3. Attachment to rites and rituals, 4. Sensual craving or lust, 5. Ill will, 6. Craving for fine material existence, 7. Craving for immaterial existence, 8. Conceit, 9. Restlessness, 10. Ignorance. The first fetter is the self-illusion, the wrong view that the mind and the body belong to a self. We are unaware of the danger of our attachment and clinging to this illusory self that drives the endless cycle of rebirth and suffering. The second fetter is skepticism or uncertainty about whether there is a path or whether one has the ability to walk it, if it does exist. Questioning the path to liberation, the triple gem in action and the consequence of action is a major impediment. The third fetter is attachment to rites and rituals, which also includes attachment to religious ceremonies, deep absorption, concentration, and the precepts, and to ceremonies and customs such as celebrating Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. There is nothing wrong in enjoying these customs, but the point is that they cause us to be attached to them, which results in suffering, and they don't lead to enlightenment. When you fully eliminate the first 3 fetters, you will become a stream enterer, the first of the 4 stages of enlightenment. You will be free from attachment, without a self and no craving which can control your actions. We overcome the first fetter, illusion of self, by separating the knower mind from physical and mental phenomena. We overcome the second fetter, skepticism or uncertainty, by observing the cause and effect of the arising of phenomena. At this stage, the practitioner clearly understands the cause and effect of the arising of dependent origination. We overcome the third fetter, attachment to rites and rituals, by objectively observing and seeing the 3 marks of existence of the arising of phenomena. The benefit of attaining the first stage of enlightenment, steam enterer, is the knowledge of which is the right and which is the wrong path, and the concept of self or ego is eliminated, as are the causes to be reborn in a woeful realm. One will experience freedom and happiness to a greater degree than the average person. Ultimately, the 5 aggregates dissolve after death. No external possessions, such as our money, fame, or material possessions, can come with us into the afterlife. They all return to the world under the 3 marks of existence, impermanence, suffering, and no self. The path to wisdom requires mindfulness practice, the practice of the four foundations of mindfulness, which is the most critical step to cultivate wisdom and liberation. We don't have much time to train and practice, life is short and uncertain, so don't waste the little time you have. Without faith, right effort and patience in practicing after listening to the Dhamma teachings, there is no way to walk the path of genuine wisdom and liberation to free us from the cycle of rebirth and suffering. Only through practice can the wisdom necessary to understand the Dhamma be cultivated. Our wrong actions or karma in the past, expressed through body, speech, and mind, cause us to experience suffering in the present moment, and in the endless cycle of death and rebirth through the different realms. We need to practice in the same way to cultivate the threefold training, Trisikkha, that reduces the obstacles to Dhamma practice and encourages the development of the supporting factors, atmosphere, food, companions, Dhamma, and the teacher. Now that you have found Buddhism and its teachings, it is a good time to start practicing and embark on this journey that will help you to acquire the wisdom to fully develop your potential. Whether or not we have enough faith to follow the path of wisdom to be liberated from suffering depends on how much time and effort we will devote to practice. Listening to Dhamma, as we're doing at this moment, and cultivating right understanding is necessary before we start practicing, so we know how to properly meditate and cultivate our mental development. Some people are not used to the term the five aggregates and are wondering what it means. It is from the Pali language and refers to the body and mind, the impersonal components that come together to make an apparent individual, perceived as self. For instance, when we're sitting in meditation, the body is the form aggregate, and the mind that is aware of the body sitting is the consciousness aggregate. When we notice feelings of pain in the body or happiness or suffering in the mind, we know the feeling aggregate has arisen, and the knower of that pain is the consciousness aggregate. Sometimes we think about the past, and sometimes we recognize the contacts at the six sense doors. This is the perception aggregate. And when we notice that our mind is drifting into daydreams, good or bad, or it is bored, greedy, angry, or deluded, this means the mental formation aggregate has arisen. All we have to do is train the mind with the four foundations of mindfulness and be aware of which of the five aggregates has arisen. We observe this arising in order to see which of the four foundations of mindfulness is the most useful and suitable for us to use as the base of mindfulness, and which causes mindfulness to arise most readily. We can use the mind, the body, feeling, or phenomena as the base, and this can help us clearly contemplate the five aggregates. We just need to see what works best for our individual practice. Some people already have developed a good foundation in right concentration. They use sitting meditation or awareness of the breath pattern to practice mindfulness, and some people find walking meditation or chanting more helpful for their practice. When the mind strays from the base of the breath, walking, or chanting, they notice it. This is the most important part. Notice when the mind strays and don't intervene. Just knowing how the mind works and seeing what arises in the mind and body without intervening will allow us to cultivate the right practice of mindfulness with right effort and concentration until the mind becomes stable, objectively observing and watching from the base. This can cause wisdom to arise to see the true nature of the body and mind. For those who are strong in concentration, when the three mental aggregates arise, the knower mind will see them and they will disappear immediately. At first the mind always got lost in thought, clung to emotion and attached to it as self, but when we practice more we realize that the mind naturally wanders off, sometimes getting attached to external objects, and sometimes we control the mind to stay at the base, causing tension. The critical point is to observe the mind, and whenever contact at the six sense doors causes it to stray or overfocus, just be aware when this has happened and always bring it back to the base. It is more important to be aware of this process than to know about the stories and the thoughts that arise. When we are aware that contact at the six sense doors has caused the mind to stray, this is called absence of mindfulness or delusion. The mind has been deluded into thinking, and if we're aware of this, mindfulness has arisen, and clear comprehension will bring the mind back to the present moment at the base. This training requires the effort of knowing and noticing in order to see all the feelings and sensations that arise during practice, such as the 5 hindrances, which are sleepiness, ill will, doubt, and restlessness, wandering of thoughts, among others. If we practice correctly, the knower mind will always be aware and at the base. This causes it to be detached from phenomena, and it will realize that the thoughts that arise are separate from it, they are just objects known but not belonging to us. The thinking mind and sleepiness are also separate or different from the knower mind. Once we are able to see them separately and clearly, sleepiness or delusion, lack of mindfulness, cannot control the 3 mental aggregates. They will just arise, exist, and torment the knower mind for a while and finally fade away. Then the knower mind will see all the obstacles and defilements collapse in front of us. When they disappear, rapture or joy will arise in the knower mind and cause happiness to arise also. The obstacles to the development of mindfulness and right concentration are a group of defilements that the Buddha called the 5 hindrances. 1. Sensual pleasure. 2. Ill will. 3. Sloth and torpor. 4. Restlessness and remorse. 5. Doubt. We need to cultivate effort, patience, and resoluteness to make the mind strong so it can train and practice mindfulness and concentration to cultivate right concentration or knower mind. The 5 hindrances are obstacles, but they can help us to train the mind to be strong by overcoming them. Patience, diligence, and right effort help us overcome the hindrances and prepare us for the real pain and suffering that we will face in the future. We don't know what will happen to us. We may experience an accident and become disabled, have to sit in a wheelchair for the rest of our life, or we may have to lie in bed waiting for death. We need to be prepared and practice by training the mind to be mindful and learn the true nature of the body and mind until wisdom clearly understands and accepts their true nature. Then the mind will let go of attachment and freedom will arise within the mind. If the mind overcomes the 5 hindrances, it will be stable and able to objectively observe and separate itself from the 5 aggregates and 6 sense doors. This mind has the necessary quality to see the 5 aggregates just the way they really are. This is called insight meditation. We need to practice mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom when problems arise, such as when there is a pain in our leg or back. Be mindful, and if the mind strays and attaches to the pain, just know when it does and bring the mind back to the base. Then observe how the mind reacts to the pain. If disliking or craving to move or worry about the pain arises, and if the mind attaches to them, just be aware and bring it back to the base. Our effort and patience will support the mind to maintain continuing awareness at the base, causing mindfulness to arise spontaneously without intention. We need to prepare ourselves for the suffering that is inherent in life, whether it is facing death and separation from loved ones or simply dissatisfaction from meeting someone we dislike. The 4 foundations of mindfulness are a key tool for us to prepare the mind to deal with suffering. If you are still a beginner and feel that it is hard to practice mindfulness, please don't give up. Continue your efforts based on patience and resoluteness using the 4 foundations of mindfulness as the base. We should be about 20% aware of the base while sitting with eyes closed and about 80% aware of the contact at the 6 sense doors. When you're hearing my voice, the knower mind is at the base and the ears hear my voice. At that moment there is no one or self, just the knower mind and the contact at the 6 sense doors. But if you are not practicing mindfulness, the mind will stray from the base and become attached to what is being said. A self has arisen. But if we practice correctly, the knower mind will be objectively aware and alert, separate from everything, and will see everything that arises in the body and mind. The four foundations of mindfulness prevent the mind from straying and becoming attached to external phenomena, help to maintain morality, despite unwholesome thoughts which may arise. Once mindfulness spontaneously arises, clear comprehension, the first stage of wisdom that follows the four foundations of mindfulness, will follow, and it will assure our appropriate action through body, speech, and thought. It will protect us from all wrongdoing and immoral acts, because clear comprehension's job is to make sure the mind and mindfulness are always at the base and to see the best course of action and its consequences. By cultivating the four foundations of mindfulness practice, we will be able to recognize the enemy, external phenomena, that can trap our mind, and of which we must be aware. It will help to see whether it has strayed and become attached to external phenomena and then bring it back to the base. Whether the distraction is pain that arises in the body or sleepiness that arises in the mind, if the knower mind is alert and objectively observing from the base, it will know all external conditions and all contacts/impacts on the mind and body. The mind that has been cultivated with mindfulness practice will be calm, bright, light, suitable and quick to recognize phenomena. When the four foundations of mindfulness are fully cultivated, the mind will be stable and objectively observing from the base. Then mindfulness will change into right concentration or knower mind, which has the ability to separate itself from and see all five aggregates, six sense doors and mental and physical phenomena. This is the starting point for separation of the mind from the suffering of physical and mental phenomena. It is the first stage of wisdom or Vipassana meditation, and we can now apply this technique to our daily life. When we experience problems in life, we can be mindful at the base and separate the mind from them, and wisdom will guide us through without attachment. We will be able to live our life with happiness, even though pain and suffering are all around us. We will be able to elevate the mind by separating it from suffering and find true happiness. Whenever the mind is controlled by the defilements, craving and clinging will cause us to perform bad deeds or use harsh speech. The mind is clouded and tainted by the defilements, mainly greed, anger, hatred, and delusion. But with Vipassana meditation, it will objectively observe the three marks of existence in them till it clearly understands and accepts their true nature, at which time craving and clinging will be eradicated. When there is no craving and clinging, the mind is free and permanent happiness will arise within. Vipassana meditation is the tool we use to stop spinning the wheel of suffering, death, and rebirth. We must continue to practice resolutely, even when we feel lazy or sleepy or want to stop practicing. Continue to practice with patience and right effort and keep examining the mind at every moment, because if it has been taken over by the hindrances, you will no longer understand what is being said. People may sit here with the mind wandering and no longer understanding what is being said, no longer feeling the pain in the body and unaware of what is arising in the body and mind. They are completely lacking in mindfulness. The four foundations of mindfulness practice are the key to cultivate the base, to be aware of contact at all the sense doors. The knower mind and thoughts are different. The knower mind and feelings or sensations are also different. Only when we can see this separation will we be able to liberate the mind at each moment from the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that arise. For instance, we will see boredom as separate from the knower mind, and we will see all things come and go when the conditions are ripe for them to do so, cause and effect. Once we see very clearly and accept the truth of the five aggregates, we will be liberated from the suffering caused by ignorance. You can gauge your practice progress by noticing whether or not your mind is always at the base and stable. The knower mind will see that the body is just the form aggregate which is sitting, and the knower mind is observing. There is no self, no me, no I, and we put down the burden of the five aggregates that we thought belonged to us or were self. If a pain arises in the body, the knower mind is separate from it, and it does not belong to any particular person, it just arises and passes away. We patiently continue to observe this at each moment and gradually ease our attachment away from the mind and body. We see the five aggregates for what they are: impermanent, suffering, and no self, and this will cause wisdom to eradicate craving and clinging, which are the cause of suffering. Then we feel lighter, happier, and more peaceful in the present moment because we are able to let go of our craving, the cause of attachment. The inner cultivation of peace and wisdom will enable us to be content with simple things as we gain greater understanding of the Buddha's teachings, and by following his teaching by practicing, we will experience permanent happiness. I hope everyone has enjoyed this Dhamma talk and wish you all success in your practice. May all of you be mindful and walk the path until you reach enlightenment. Anumodana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Trisikkha Meditation Center, Plant City, Florida.